think we can start slowly then.
Okay, good. So to the ones who arrived early, this is the third time that I say it, so welcome and good morning. We are thrilled to welcome you to the third open training session organized by Resilience Project. For the ones who don't know, I'll just briefly explain that Resilience is a project funded by the European Commission, and it's focused on sharing the most promising cross-sectoral adaptation solutions and also supporting cities and regions across Europe to become more resilient to climate change. So this open training session, or OTS as we call it, in this one we will present 2 funding opportunities which are currently available to regions working on different steps of their adaptation pathways. This session actually is part of a series of workshops that we have, of webinars, that will be soon explained by my colleague Matthias, who will also soon be introduced. But first, I would just like to briefly inform you about the housekeeping. So if we go to the next slides. Just so you know, all the mics are being disabled while you come, so that we avoid these background noises during the presentations and the moderation as well. You can put your camera on if you like, if you have a stable connection and you would like to appear in the recording. Just note, please, that this meeting will be recorded soon. It's being already, right, Matthias? And okay. And it will be made available on Regina's website. So if you don't feel comfortable, in appearing, just shut off your camera. You can use this chat. We're going to have a few moments of questions and answers, and also a roundtable at the end. So you can use the chat to already write your questions to the speakers during the presentation, so that you don't forget them. And then we can, of course, just have a look during these Q&A sessions to the questions that are there. And also in the Q&A moment, if you like, at the end in the roundtable, you can raise your hand, and then we can allow you to unmute your mic for questions. I think this is all now. So just before we start with the presentations, I would like to take a couple of minutes to present the moderators and the speakers. And afterwards, we're gonna briefly go through the agenda. So this webinar is moderated by me, Jen Heeman, and also Matthias, who is here from FEDARENE. I work at the Institute for European Energy and Climate Policy Foundation, in short is IECP. We are based in the Netherlands. Actually, the institute is based in the Netherlands, but I'm speaking to you from the coast of Portugal, and it's not such a sunny day as I hope today, but it's okay. IECP is also Resilience project coordinator, and I work more specifically on the project management and stakeholder engagement strategy. And maybe now, Matthias, can you please introduce yourself?
Yes, good morning, everyone, from my side. I'm Matthias Watzak-Helmer. I'm co-moderator today with Jen during this meeting. I'm working as project manager at FEDARENE, the European Federation of Agencies and Regions for Energy, Climate and Environment. And I'm also leading the capacity building activities within the Resilience project, and happy to organize this session today and the further comings.
Thank you.
To you, Jen.
Okay, so we have invited 2 colleagues from 2 European projects, which are CLIMAAX and Pathways to Resilience. And these projects, they are offering cascade funding opportunities and support also for regions to step up their climate action. So I would like just to say a warm thank you to Frederiek and Ricardo, who will provide these insights and details on the application process for this cascade funding that the projects are offering. Frederiek and Ricardo, I will just briefly introduce you with the text that you sent me, but of course you feel free to say a few other words when you start your presentation, okay? So Frederiek Weiland, and I hope I pronounced it correctly. She's a senior advisor and researcher at DELTARES. Frederiek is a project manager of the Horizon Europe project CLIMAAX. She holds a PhD on the topic of hydrological climate change assessments and their uncertainties. She has worked at DELTARES for the past 15 years, and she has applied her knowledge in several EU projects and consultancy projects for, amongst others, the World Bank and the development of the Dutch flood and drought climate scenarios. So I would like just to ask a round of applause or hands to Frederiek. It's very good to have you here. And also I would like to say a few words about Ricardo da Silva. He's a program management at the EIT Climate Kick. He joins us from Climate Click, the innovation agency, which is specialized in supporting public authorities in their climate adaptation processes. He's the lead for sub-grantee engagement from the Pathways to Resilience project, implementing the EU Mission for Adaptation, and we'll be talking about the recently launched open call. So also I would like to ask a round of applause or hands to Ricardo. Thank you so much for joining us today. And now I will pass the ball to Matthias. No, first, I'm sorry. First, I'm just going to go briefly through the agenda. So we are having now this welcome introduction, and soon I'll pass the ball to Matthias to talk a bit about the European funding opportunities. And then we're going to have some 15 minutes for Frederiek to present the opportunities from the CLIMAAX project. And then if we have a few questions, we can already address them right after the presentation. We can take some 5 minutes for that. If not, we just jump directly to Ricardo's presentation on the Pathways to Resilience funding opportunity. Again, if you already have some questions specifically to Ricardo, we can address them. Otherwise, we start the roundtable, in which we have prepared a couple of questions. And of course, we are going to raise the questions from the chat, from the audience. And then you will also have the opportunity just to raise your hand and pose any doubts or questions that you would like. And we finalize with some wrap up and closing and a satisfaction survey that we hope you to fill out, which will be quite quickly. So now, Matthias, back to you.
Thanks, Jen. I want to give you a brief overview of what we are doing within the Resilience project and focus on two opportunities. Our main aim is to support European regions in stepping up on their climate adaptation actions. And therefore, today we are in one of our open training sessions. And this is a cycle of events divided into two different parts. And we are now in the open training session cycle 1. We already had a very interesting session on the EU landscape on resilience and on pathway development. Today we focus on funding the climate resilience process. And we will have a 4th session in this first cycle addressing more general topics on multi-level governance, where we will talk about climate resilience in the national and regional adaptation plans, and also on a governance framework and tool that has been developed by the project Transformar, one of our sister projects. In the second cycle of our open training sessions, we will focus more on sectoral challenges and available solutions, and also give insights on good practices from regions and for regions. This second cycle shall be tailored to your requests and your needs also from your perspective. So within the final feedback survey, we also have a dedicated question to help us to prioritize the topics for the sessions in the second cycle and help to tailor the program that we will be able to deliver in the next 1.5 years approximately. Secondly, and that brings me more to today's topic, the funding and climate resilience process. On the next slide, you can see that Resilience Project has developed an overview of available funding opportunities. And we have analyzed these funding opportunities mainly from the European level and prepared an overview to help to cluster and analyze it according to the sectors that wouldn't require funding or where the funding is provided for. And in the middle, you see the eligible applicants, and also provide a short description of this. On the next slide, you can see that this is available for everyone, freely available on regilience.eu funding opportunities. And I will post this in the chat in a minute, so you can access this page and filter there according to your needs. So you can filter on what type of funding, of the size of the budget that you would need to get funding for which country and region, and which sector would require some funding. On the third page, you see an overview how the information is shared afterwards, after you have identified one suitable source. We have developed a one-pager to give you in the middle a short description of the funding opportunity, and have on the left side of the overview, we have all the relevant informations on sectors, on budget, on eligibility criteria. And we don't go too much into details. We also do not highlight specific calls within these funding opportunities, but what we do is we provide links and guidance materials to learn more about how to apply, what to expect in more detail, as well as to the open calls that are available at the moment. And that shall help to identify available funding opportunities. And today we are going to hear about two projects that have successfully applied for European level fundings, but do not take all the money for themselves, but they are available to share support and money with European players. And I think Chen is going to introduce.
Thank you, Matthias. So, well, let's jump to the first presentation then, because everyone must be curious to hear about it. So, Frederiek, welcome. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that you can share your presentation, right? Let's see if it works. Welcome, and thank you so much for joining us today. You are muted, so I cannot hear you now. But I hope you are able to.
Yeah, then I'm going up in the air. Can you see the presentation?
No, not yet.
Sure. Yeah, it should be fine now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, good morning. Sorry for that. And yeah, thanks for organizing and bringing this all together, because I also think for us it is important to have this opportunity to promote the open goal and to reach out to regions and others to be able to apply. So from DELTARES, I'm leading the CLIMAAX project, and CLIMAAX in the past year, we developed a climate risk and vulnerability assessment framework and a toolbox. Well, both are now ready for use, or at least the first versions are in the air. So I first present a little bit of that, and after that I'll discuss the open call. So first of all, CLIMAAX is part of the EU Mission on Adaptation, who indeed funded us as a project, but also provided funding to us to then fund the regions, with the main aim to support regions in developing climate risk assessments. So this picture is just to set the scene. Like in Europe, we have many challenges: droughts, floods, heat waves, wildfires, and CLIMAAX wants to serve those all. And of course, we understand that in different regions, the way these hazards are experienced and the impact of the hazards are really different. So we also want to serve that. And at the same time, the climate risk assessments, they will feed the climate adaptation process, about which P2R will tell a lot more later, I think. But the climate risk assessments also feeds the disaster risk management planning, so improved civil protection. Well, serving all those needs, our motto was standardized flexibility, and that's also how our toolbox looks. So CLIMAAX exists of three main pillars. There is first the framework for regional climate risk assessments. There's the development of the toolbox and its application in pilots, and now finally also in the regions. And there is the cascading funds. So first I'll tell a little bit about the climate risk framework. the first version is out and is being tested in our pilot regions. It starts with the different steps in doing the climate risk assessment. So making an inventory of stakeholders, of governance structures in place that support climate risk assessments. Gives you practical guidance on how to identify and quantify past and future trends, and also to identify those risk indicators that are relevant for your region. So which hazards play an important role, which sectors are affected. So for each region, the risk indicator may be different, and that's something we want to provide. And as said, in the end, the risk assessment that's being done and completed in one of the pilot projects should feed the disaster risk management there and the climate adaptation. So I'm not going to go into detail, but this climate risk assessment framework has been refined in the last months by YASA and CMCC. And it provides a stepwise guide on how to do the climate risk assessment. And it gives you also directs you to different climate scenarios, to different socio-economic scenarios. And there is a link to the CLIMAAX toolbox, how you could integrate that in your process as well. But there's also the stakeholder approach that is also part of the climate risk assessment. So you can follow the steps, or you can take those steps that are most relevant to you. Well, then there's the climate risk assessment toolbox. We decided to develop it in 3 different layers, because we also expect different users, like the technical experts, but also the non-expert users who just want to view the data. So there's the base layer that takes data from the Copernicus data store, from the GRC Risk Data Hub, and we combine it into European maps of risk indicators. So it's the simple access. But then the toolbox also contains a IPython notebook facility, where you can play around with the data, where you can access the scripts that we use to calculate the indicators. So that's already the more technical part, and one can modify the data. And finally, when there are really technical local users, they can download the scripts, download the data, but also merge it with local data and local knowledge to improve the climate risk assessments. So, this is a bit the technical view of the IPython notebook facility, but then this also is presenting like a flat map of how it would look if you do have a look at the European risk assessments. There's a possibility to also digest local data. Well, there's a land use map for Selena, but together with Barcelona, one of our pilots, we are looking at heat waves, and they said, like, we want to also look at the elderly people who are more affected by heat waves. So you can add and adjust a lot of details which are relevant for your region. Well, the tools have been tested in 5 pilot regions. They started in August, so they helped us in defining what a toolbox and a framework should look like. And they're part of our project, so they're project partners, and that's a bit different than the cascading fund that will be provided and that I'll discuss later. So these are the 5 pilots. In January, there will also be a demonstration pilot workshop organized in Setúbal. It's a hybrid workshop, so that coincides with the period during which proposals need to be developed. So if you have time on the 31st of January, there's a possibility to see what the pilot regions did and how they performed their climate risk assessments. And we'll provide more info about that later. Okay. Then there is the cascading fund. So over the full project, we aim to fund about 16 regions and communities. We are, of course, not sure yet how many applications will be submitted, but we aim for diversity and also to see the needs on the ground. So diversity, first and for all, means that we've decided that from each country, only 6 applicants will be granted to make sure we cover a large part of Europe. And one of the criteria is also the vulnerability of a region. So there's the GRC vulnerability index, and those countries scoring more vulnerability according to that, they receive on that criteria some higher points. So the first call is open now. It opened last Friday, the 8th of December, and it will be open for 3 months. So applications need to be handed in online on the 8th of March. Then in June, there will be a second round, or a second call for applications. So if you missed the first one, you can still apply for the second one. And what we've said is, in the first call, we only want to grant about 20 or 30 applicants, but those proposals that are still very successful can resubmit to the second round as well. Then in the end, the projects will have 2 years to run the entire project, and they must be finished by autumn 2026. What does a project entail? So it's 2 years. The M6 stands for month 6, and it means that the first step takes a half year, and in that one you're using the European scale toolbox and the framework to do a rough assessment. After that, you have until month 18, so that's about a year to refine that with local knowledge, local data, and other things you're missing in the toolbox. So you can make it specific for your region. And I know some regions like to use things they already have in place and integrated. So there's this opportunity. And then finally, the last half year is for reporting, providing a risk assessment deliverable to us, to also evaluate how this whole process went and how that went in the different regions. And it's also to scope a little bit based on the climate risk assessment, you know, your main hazards, and you scope yourself already a bit for where adaptation is needed and how you could in the future gain funding for that implementation of adaptation. In summary, the CLIMAAX open call offers lump sum funding. It's between 150,000 to 300,000 euros, and that depends slightly on the GDP of the country. The applicants will have access to the operational supporting toolbox. There is support through the CLIMAAX help desk. We will not do the climate risk assessment for you, but we are there to help out when there are technical problems. And the applicants will have access to a network exchange. So we will organize workshops with the regions that were granted, and they can exchange ideas of how they're doing their risk assessments. As said, the call is open. Application form is online. It's like ticking the boxes when you have to do the application. It's not a real PDF of a proposal, but more filling in the form. And we've been presenting it at several occasions, and we're currently collecting the frequently asked questions, and they're also online at this moment. So if you have questions that you cannot get answered today or later on, you can also consult that one. Here's a link to the call and to the CLIMAAX website for more information. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Frederiek. Actually, I was about to ask if there was a link, a short link directly to the call, but perfect. It's already there. Because this was raised by Vicky in the chat. So very good. Thank you so much.
Okay.
I see we don't have other questions in the chat, only the one about the link. So what we can do is we can move directly to Ricardo's presentation, and then we'll have around.
Jen, we had one raised hand. Do we ask? We have one raised hand, so maybe, please, you can unmute yourself, Evelyn, I think.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm Evelyn from La Réunion. I work for the Regional Agency for Development and Innovation. And I'm here with a colleague of mine from the University of La Réunion. He's a researcher. And in the CLIMAAX open call, it is said that a non-profit entity representing a regional community can apply for the call. And we were wondering that if the fact that the University of La Réunion was designated by the Regional Council to conduct a kind of state of play of the impact of climate change and what is already existing in terms of adaptation and mitigation, would you consider the University of La Réunion as a non-profit entity representing the regional community or not?
Yeah, unfortunately, you're not formally or legally representing the authority, but there is a way to do this because La Réunion itself is, of course, eligible to apply. And within the application, you can also subcontract a technical service. And a technical service is also a university. So it depends if you can form a team and do it together, but still have them as the main applicants, even when they won't have less funding from the budget than you do, you can apply together.
Okay,
but then as a subcontractor.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. That's a very important one, actually. Does anyone else would like to raise a question now? Just raise the hand and then, okay. Then we can, I don't see any hand. Do you, Matthias? Because I haven't seen the other one. Okay, good.
No, it's fine.
Then Ricardo, welcome. And the floor is yours. If you can please share your screen.
Thank you. I'll do it in a second. Also to flag that there's a question in the chat that is one that we get very often regarding UK eligibility. Yeah, I don't know if Frederiek, if you want to answer that. As you might imagine, I have my answer ready, but
well, if you have it ready and we're in the same situation as you are, please go ahead. Yeah.
There we go. Okay, I wasn't sure if for some reason we had different situations. So in our case, the unfortunate fact is that no, it's not eligible because essentially the UK is reassociating with Horizon in 2024, but our budgets are from before. So yeah, so we're stuck in this strange situation. But the result is that no. So that's the answer to that question. I don't know if you want to add anything, Frederiek.
Yep.
No, that's it. Okay, then let me put my, sorry for, thanks for acknowledging.
No apologies, that was great. Thanks for adding.
Yeah, I'm feeling a little bit out of sorts today, but I think I have presented this, what is it, a few times now. So this should work. Okay, so thanks for having me. It's really a pleasure to be able to talk about our work and to connect the initiatives that we have across different projects. And it's also very good to be able to do it right after CLIMAAX because we are so.
I think you're muted or something. I realize you're speaking.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Wait.
I can hear everything, Ricardo. It's fine from my side.
It just worked, no?
Okay, interesting. So you can.
Maybe Matthias, can you say something?
Yes, Jen, I can hear everything. It might be on your side that you don't hear us. I will text you.
On my side, everything is fine.
Thanks.
It's working. Okay, good. Okay. I don't hear anyone, so I'm going to jump off and come back again. You continue. Go ahead. Sorry about that.
Thank you. Yeah, losing track of thought, but essentially, I think what I was trying to refer to it was, there will be a lot of similarities to the presentation before. So apologies for that if it gets confusing, but because there are differences in some eligibility things and some processes, but yeah, let's get to it. So what is what is P2R? So what is Pathways to Resilience, and what do we want to do? So as it is in the name, we come, actually, let me show you the next one. If you saw in the presentation of Frederiek the logic of the intervention of the climate adaptation mission, we are essentially on the next step of the pyramid, on the intervention logic. So our objective is to support the pathways part. So how do we want to support the regions to develop a shared vision of what climate adaptation can be? And that's where intervening, where these pathways come into. I'm not going to try to describe what a pathway technically is, but essentially it's a roadmap that makes sense in the short term, in the medium term, and the long term, and takes a systemic view to adaptation. And our approach in Pathways to Resilience is to try to expand the options that we have available, because From the work that we have done, we would say that there's a tendency to treat adaptation, to react to adaptation in an incremental way, which makes sense because usually there's one disaster that's more prominent, or there's a bigger risk of something happening in the short term, and a reaction must be made. And what we want to give the tools for is that when there is a need to do incremental adaptation, okay, these are the tools that you should use. But if you want to take adaptation with a longer term view, with a wider view, if you want to engage in transformative adaptation, these should be the tools that we want to make available. So that's sort of the philosophy. So transformative adaptation, that's what we want to get to. How do we intend to do this? So essentially why we're here today, especially, is to talk about the subgranting, because we have a little bit of money for subgranting, over 20 million, that's going to be allocated to 100 regions. And essentially, the logic of this is to support the regions in this transformative adaptation by trying out the approach that we've been developing, which is the regional resilience journey, rolls off the tongue, which is essentially the little diagram that you see there in the bottom. So we want to help regions to essentially come up with a climate resilience or adaptation strategy, and action plan and investment plan. So realizing that all of this comes together. Of course, we recognize that regions have done quite a bit of work on this. So essentially, what we want with our approach is to help them to make it stronger, to make the strategies, the action plan, and investment plans stronger in the aspects that are most needed. Okay, so this should be the summary. And what I want to say here, I have too many slides, so I will send the presentation later. The logic of our intervention is, okay, so we want to engage the regions through the subgranting. The regions that are engaged in the subgranting, essentially, they will be taking part in our big capacity building program, which runs for the whole duration, which is essentially 18 months. And while we give a lot of input on the methodologies that we have developed, we are also collecting experiences, case studies, and tools so that we build a practical toolbox which is enriching for everyone. So essentially, our capacity building program is one in which we engage the regions that are participating to test, validate, and build what we have. So we are not only giving knowledge and tools and so on, but we are co-creating it. And that's essentially the gist of it. We can get into more details at some point and how this will work. But essentially, it's a mix of input, co-creation, peer-led, and so on. And we're going to have different formats for this, but we'll get to it later. I would invite you to have a deeper look into the framework that we've put together in our website, because it has a little bit, it has quite a bit of detail. But essentially, let me just point out that the idea is that while the funding support and a lot of the methodology and frameworks that we're going to give, they are focused on the adaptation planning phase. We take into account essentially that adaptation does not stop at the planning phase, but also goes into implementation. But we are limited in the mission logic for the adaptation for the planning phase, which is what the funding should go into. And for each of these little blocks that you see in this diagram, there are steps and sub-steps, and for each of them we will try to give, we have already provided the first version in our website of what we expect through each of them, and then we're going to start populating it with the tools and the templates and etc. for each of this, let's say, sub-deliverables, sub-milestones that each of them should correspond to. So essentially, that's just a sneak peek into what we've been putting together. You can find that on our website. I'm not going to go into who's been developing this, but rest assured that it's a variety of expertise put together. And let's talk a little bit more about the call itself. So what is it? We published our call a few weeks before CLIMAAX did. And so we close a little bit before, but essentially we're also open for 3 months. Essentially the main things to know. So our target is to select and support 40 sub-grantees at this phase. There's going to be 210,000 for each of the selected ones, and the support phase is supposed to be between July 2024 and December 2025, so roughly 18 months. You'll see the rest of the timeline later. The main selection criteria. So same as CLIMAAX, the idea is that we select the most vulnerable regions, and we want to have out of these 40 a very diverse portfolio, because essentially we are testing and validating this approach, and we want to test and validate it in as broad as possible of a portfolio, where possible. So basically we are balancing out the vulnerability with, okay, how many countries can we get in? How many bioregions can we get represented? How many climate risk types are more prominent in each of the regions? Different scales of applicants are desirable, and so on and so forth. So these two criteria are arguably as important, arguably equally important. And most of all, essentially, the first thing that we want to know in the application is, okay, where will you apply the methodology that we put together? We start from the assumption that for a lot of you, the scale of NUTS 1, NUTS 2, NUTS 3, or LAU will be relevant, but if not, in the eligible countries, it's completely okay to express something equivalent. But essentially, we expect, okay, if you're tell us at which level you're going to be applying it, and then we can evaluate the application properly. In terms of timeline, essentially the main thing to say here, we're running a few info sessions to go a little bit more into detail of what we expect in the application, but essentially the application closes on the 22nd of February, and then we're going to go through the different phases of selection, and that's why only in July do we expect to start working with you. And essentially, as I've been saying, the main thing here, the expectations from the ones that we select are to test, validate, and further develop the methodology that we've been developing. That means attending the sessions that we put together, using and reviewing the methodologies and resources that we put there, and then contributing with your own experiences, tools, and so on and so forth. So that's one aspect of it. And then the second part, and this is important, the main expectation is that our funding and our support helps you in your adaptation journey. And how we measure this is through the deliverables that I mentioned before. So one, where did you start? So the baseline report, but of course the strategy, the action plan, and the investment plan. And the key part here, or the key word maybe, is progress. So some regions will already have plans. Other regions will have to make their first ones. The funding and the support that we give, we recognize it's not possible to go through the entire methodology that we've put together and respect wholeheartedly each and every one of the sub-steps, because each of them is almost a journey in themselves. So essentially, the expectation is progress. So it might make sense, for example, that you already have some form of adaptation strategy in place, but you're lacking the aspect of how to make it fundable, how to make it attractive for investors, how to leverage the rest of the funding that you need to actually implement it. That can be the main focus that we expect. We expect you to go through to learn through our methodology and understand what transformative adaptation is. But in terms of implementation, it will be sufficient progress if that already translates into significant advancing into the investment plan. Same as if it was another element, such as building a shared vision or stakeholder engagement, but hopefully that example gives the idea. And I believe I'm spending a lot of time already, so let me focus on the essentials. So in our case, in terms of eligibility, this is where it gets a little complicated too, and in comparison to CLIMAAX. So the first thing, the ones applying must be part of EU member states or associate countries. So essentially that means that that there's the exception that we already mentioned with UK. There's also some restrictions related to Hungary, Ukraine, and Russia and Belarus. You can see that those are minimal, I would say. And then there's the aspect of within Europe's biogeographical regions. So this is a definition that is, let me actually show you. This is a definition that is that comes from the EEA, and essentially it essentially focuses on regions which are in the geographical that are in the geographical conditioning of of these regions here, of these locations. So essentially, what it means effectively is that from the EU member state and associated countries, that so for example, we've already had some discussions with La Réunion. So as an outermost region, it makes them ineligible as not being within these geographies, and same for countries in Northern Africa, which also would be outside of the biogeographical region. Everything is rolling off the tongue today. So yeah, so those are the major restrictions in terms of territory, and then probably quite similar to CLIMAAX. It's what kind of entities can apply. So essentially, we expect that the ones that lead the application, the ones that are going to be the coordinators, the ones that are going to be the main point of contact with us, are the public authorities or public bodies that have governed this, that have received the consent and the support from the public authorities to lead this. But the leads can decide to form a consortium, and then within that consortium, we can have non-profit bodies and or small and medium enterprises. Hopefully that's as clear as can be. I'm not totally keeping track of time, so I have a few minutes more, I believe. Yeah. Okay. So then let me go super quickly. So yeah, as I mentioned before, the activities that are eligible is everything related to adaptation planning. So which is essentially developing the deliverables, everything that supports the development of the deliverables, everything related to communication, dissemination, project management. We certainly favor knowledge sharing. What is not eligible is anything related to this demonstration and deployment of climate adaptation solutions. Should leave this quite clear. The application, this is the call for applicants and not a call for proposals. So we are less interested in knowing.
I think we have just lost. You
Yeah,
had
sorry, my connection. There we go, but almost done. So it's a call for proposal. It's a call for application, not a call for proposal. So less interested in what the adaptation plan is, but actually to determine your needs in terms of adaptation, actually. So that means that essentially we try not to ask too much from you. So we get the basic information. What are the entities? What is the scope of the project? We try to assess your maturities through the methodology that we developed, which is the resilience maturity curve. And then we ask a few questions that are basically related to essentially the commitment to the mission adaptation, your approach to stakeholder engagement, the approach to climate justice topics. What do you see from, not from necessarily from, so while we analyze the climate risk data externally, we wanna hear from you. How do you see that is more important for you to have a need for support? What is your approach to knowledge sharing beyond the region? And how do you leverage your resource mobilization plan? So all of these, we expect shortish answers, but that's what's going to inform us in assessing the applications. Because essentially, the way that we assess is, first we have a pre-screening related mostly to vulnerability and we're going to essentially, two factors, vulnerability and the number of countries. So we're going to accept essentially the number of applications per country received is going to be depending on the number of countries that apply. So we're trying to have it as equal per country as possible. And then to select the ones that make it is based on vulnerability. It gets a little bit more complicated, but we can leave that for the questions. And then we have external evaluators looking at the question that I mentioned before. And then we have the strategic or portfolio selection that goes deeper into the diversity aspects. And yeah, and as my colleague Frederiek already mentioned, we look at the GRC vulnerability index, but also at the inform to have between country comparisons. And I think that's a short intro to the, you can skip this one for now. That's a short intro to the call and trying to respect time as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It was great. I'm sorry I missed just the beginning, but I managed to connect again. Let me ask you something, both Frederiek and Ricardo, if you can copy and paste the link directly to the call in the chat. I think that would be useful for the audience. And now we can already start directly with the roundtable. So we're going to spend the next 30 minutes or more, 30 minutes, 35, with some questions and answers with the roundtable. And I would like already to ask the participants to write their questions on the chat. I've seen there are a few already, and also some hands raised. So I will pass the ball to Matthias to moderate this part.
Yeah. Thank you. Ricardo, may you stop sharing the screen? Then I would try to spotlight you, and I hope it works. Then we see you, the participants of the roundtable, a little bit larger. So don't be scared. I've seen a couple of questions in the chat already. If they are still referring to the presentation we just had right now, and I also see some raised hands, then I could address them directly. Otherwise, I would rather start with the roundtable if these questions are interesting for both projects and would address both projects. So
I still got a question on Ricardo.
Exactly, Andreas, I wanted to ask you, and Michael is.
Thank you. This sounds great. This is actually a cool program, very easy to participate in, I think, and with a lot of flexibility. For me, this transformative approach is thinking long term, needs this social involvement, like participation. And my question is it possible with this funding to just like get the costs for this participation process, to get a good climate strategy, or actually to redevelop it? It's already been there for 5 years, so now would be this could be a moment to just get a new movement, new vision into the region by involving all stakeholders again. Is this possible? That's my question.
So yeah, thank you for the question. That's one that I personally really value. So the answer is completely, absolutely yes. That's something that we value very much, both at the selection stage as then in the implementation. That's something that we want to support. The funding is there to support it, and we are trying to develop also making sure that all the steps reflect that, and that we structure capacity building to make a lot of space for these kind of activities.
Okay, thank you. Cool.
Yeah, and in technical terms, if you remember the slide or the point where it says the activities that are eligible, it falls into the second category essentially, which is not directly the deliverables per se, but it's the supporting activities that essentially lead you to have successful deliverables essentially.
Yeah, please send the PowerPoint. This would be great, just to show it to my team members. And also, like, this methodology you like invented, or your tools, what they are actually about. So if we participate in by using your tools, we already have tools, so or a way of implementing and working on climate adaptation in the region. And my question is, how can we like mix your methodology with us, so it's not like a completely new concept for our style of working together?
Absolutely, yeah, that's another great question. In the sense of so first of all, like everything that we develop, I mean, we are quite proud of it, and we have a lot of work to do still to make it even better. But it is, as most things, a compilation of existing methodology and existing practices in a way that we hope that makes sense. So some of it is a little bit original, a little bit a complete adaptation, so on and so forth. So of course, we also have to be open to the methodology that you're already using, and essentially we will find a way to make it make sense. And that is, as I think you understood, our approach is based on the needs, on what makes sense. So so like the tools and the guidances that we will publish, the intention is that they help. If they don't help, we want to get that feedback, but you're not forced to use them. You're not forced to stop working like you're working. Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you. You're gonna hear from me.
Very good.
Thank you, Andreas. I would also like to pass on this question to Frederiek. Is it compulsory to have no climate risk assessment done so far to apply for your funding opportunities? And how do you see also the usability of the different tools and available tools that have been developed in the different regions? And you're still on mute.
To the first question, you can already have a climate risk assessment in place, because I think doing a climate risk assessment is really diverse and you want to act on multiple hazards. So if you can motivate in your application form that there is still an impact and how you want to improve upon what is in place, that is perfectly fine. And in a way, having a climate risk assessment in place also means that you have certain skills which will be very valuable in executing a project. So it doesn't disqualify you. It doesn't necessarily improve your chances. And the other thing, using the tools that we develop. So we set out the projects in 3 phases. And the first half year, we would really like you to use the tools that we developed. And similar to what Ricardo says, mainly because we also really want that feedback on how valuable they are and what improvements are needed. And maybe to some regions, those tools are actually sufficient to conduct the climate risk assessment. But after the first half year, there is a year to conduct a detailed climate risk assessment and integrate all the tools and knowledge you have locally. So that's also perfectly fine.
Thank you. And initially, we have foreseen to ask you some questions like Chen and I, but as we're already in the middle of the discussion, we are flexible enough to adjust and adapt our program. So Michalis, you have still raised your hand. And would you like to address the question?
Yes, thank you. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Michalis Zetzanis. I'm a national contact point here in Austria, and I have a question to both projects regarding eligibility of the organizations that can take part. You say that they have to be regions of NUTS 1 to 3 or local authorities. Here in Austria, we have several regions, and most of our signatories of the Charter of the Mission, for example, are so-called CLAR regions. And this is a program, and I'm just sending in the chat a link to that, where different municipalities come together in varied geographies in such a climate adaptation region, and they are funded to come up with risk assessment, to come up with well, still a bit small scale also adaptation demonstrations and so on. But and they have a CLAR manager, and they have a regional manager and so on. So the legal entity though is an association usually. So it's not a public body, and it's not the region itself. How can they apply? Should the constituent local authorities come together in a consortium and apply and have one as a coordinator, or is it a possibility that the association, the CLAR region itself, can apply also, though it's not a NUTS or a LAW in itself? And Ricardo showed in his slides, and I'm not sure if Frederiek also had it, that you need also a PIC. So the local authorities or the NUTS regions need to get a PIC first in the funding and tenders portal before applying to your and I assume that I only have, because I see Frederiek nicking. I assume that needs only to be declared, doesn't need to be validated before. Okay.
Yeah, agree. Yeah, and on that, yeah.
You want to reply first, Frederiek? Go ahead.
Yeah, on that association, this is something we said that it could be really valuable as well, because one region could support the other region and they can learn from each other. So the consortium is fine, but I wonder what the status of that association is. Like if it's just among the group of regions, something they agreed upon, then it's not a legal thing. So in a way, then there should still be one of them being the lead in the application.
May I answer to this, because I also work with CLA regions in Austria. Do you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I think, like, from my perspective, I've been working with them for 3 years. It's definitely possible that the CLA region is a legal entity and getting funding by government or EU partners.
Okay.
So this should be, it's official from my experience as working with them and getting funded.
Well, they are a legal entity, but they're not a public body, and they're not a local authority. So they're not a Gebietskörperschaft, if anybody knows the German expression for it, and they're not a public body. They're not created by law. They're created, as Frederiek said, by the municipalities coming together and making an association or whatever, which is a legal entity, of course. It's a registered association or whatever, but still it's not a public body and it's not a regional authority.
Ricardo, do you want to reply to this? And otherwise, I would rather ask it to have a bilateral follow-up. I'm not sure if this Austrian specificity is that important for all of our audience.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm hesitating to give a confident answer because I also feel like I would like to look into it better. But I think Frederiek's answer is already in line with what I would say. That what makes me feel more confident here is, okay, have one that fits into our category of, public body or local authority be the lead in application in applying, and then, but then consider if you want to make an application like that as a group, which is something that in our case, it does. So how to put it, like it is interesting to receive an application like that, but it's also not, from a selection point of view, it's not an advantage or a disadvantage. It's, and the point is, that's a little bit of the, we have an interesting, let me see if I can explain this properly. So whether you apply as a municipality or whether you apply as a, as essentially the equivalent of a NUTS 1, so the largest geographical applicant possible, you're going to get the same budget, you're going to get the same support. So then we have an interesting system. We value the diversity of having different levels, but perhaps, and this is an assumption, perhaps it is not, perhaps financially as interesting to apply in a larger one because, you have more, perhaps you have more stakeholders and you have the same support. So while we will try to have the same number of sub-grantees at the different levels, and that gives an advantage in a way to apply as a larger one, the support is maybe not adjusted. So that's something to consider, and it's something that from our perspective, we're completely neutral. We want to incentivize applications at all levels. I know that's a confusing answer, but I hope that helps in a way.
Yeah, maybe we can get a more detailed answer to this and share it with you all. One question I did not answer before that, we will share the presentations and also make the recordings available and send you the link to these materials after our session. I see a lot of questions in the chat, so I will start addressing those ones. And if we don't manage to come through, I would also ask you to get some replies after this meeting, at least in written, or at least a reference to the FAQs or where the answer to these questions can be found. Will start reading them out. If you want to ask them in person, you can always raise your hand. But so far, question is, can a university with an assigned PhD researcher apply for a project with a regional focus and for a specific economic sector? in brackets agriculture plus food processing. Would this be eligible?
Yeah, the university itself cannot apply. It would only be as a as a technical service to a region. It should be a region that applies.
I think it's the same.
Yeah.
Okay. And the question, is it possible for regions that already have an adaptation strategy to apply for the call, has already been answered. It was a yes, as I remember. Is there a maximum budget estimate and are financial counterparts compulsory? Is one question. Would like to go first?
Yeah. So from our case,
go ahead.
I thought you were giving me, sorry. Our case, I think, is a little bit simpler. So 210,000, that's it. There's no variation. So what means is what that means in our case is that's the maximum. And if you report less, you're going to get less, essentially. In terms of financial counterparts, I'm going to assume that means co-funding or something similar. Please correct me if that's not the case. But in our case, it's not needed.
Yeah, and here the same. So the co-funding is not needed. It's lump sum. The maximum budget is 300,000 euros. But we do a country correction factor that relates to a GDP and to the, let's say the value of a euro in a country and how many man hours can be made. That means that Denmark could apply for more funding than, for example, Albania.
Okay. I also see a question from Laura Diaz. Do you want to read it out, or shall I take the floor? Okay, then I will take it. We are interested to apply at these both calls from the region of Castillo de León in Spain. So we have several questions. One is it possible to apply from our foundation directly or including the consortium as coordinator, taking into account our foundation is an organization depending on regional public administration, although our PIC is corresponding to a non-governmental organization. Second one, which would it be necessary? What is the necessary information to apply at these calls? And this is also one question I would have raised, is what are the pre-requirements to, for example, for the to Ricardo, is it required to have already a risk assessment ready to be eligible, or are there other, do you have to have prepared the ground for adaptation? Do you have to know your stakeholders when applying? Or can this be done during this period?
Short answer, no prerequisites.
From both sides, okay. And the sub-grants would be given to the organization directly, and they could manage how to use it. Is one question. And also, yeah. So I think we have again the first question on the eligibility criteria for organizations that are not directly government bodies.
Yeah, I think because it's tricky, it's really tricky, and we need to understand some details there. So I suggest either you send me or Ricardo an email, or use the information email address for the two projects. Then we can sort it out, because I don't want to say something that's wrong and then you having you not applying. So I want to figure that out on an individual level. And with regard to the sub-grants being given to you, to a applicant directly, yes, the sub-grant is given directly, although we will be paying in 3 phases. So for each one, we have a phase that's completed after 6 months, and there is an additional budget. But we want to have the deliverables, so the climate risk assessment report or a progress report, before we do the second payment.
And I think also one very interesting question, Ricardo, you wanted to add on?
Yeah, I was going to say exactly the same thing, that it's worth is looking at the payment schedule and the conditions for that in our situation as well. It's quite simple.
And we have one question on the deliverables that need to be submitted, and I would expand it a little bit to what do you expect the beneficiaries to deliver? Is there a time frame until they have to deliver some actions or some results to you? Is there a clear definition of what is the pre-requirement to receive the final amount of money, and are the payment steps based on the deliverables? So can you elaborate a little bit on what are your pre-requirements in this respect? And Frederiek, do you want to go first?
I'm not fully on top of our funding scheme, but there will be a pre-financing of about 30%, so you can get started. Then midway, there will be a deliverable summarizing your progress. So that's not a final report, but it's just showing the steps you've taken and making us confident that you're on a good track. That will release the second payment. And finally, the last payment will be released when there is a climate risk assessment report. That is in line with our expectations. So there will be a review from our side. There may be an update required, and then we can confirm that payment.
Yeah, I see here we're also very aligned. The difference is that it's not a climate risk assessment, but rather looking at all the different deliverables that we have, and it just gets a little bit more, perhaps a little bit more complex and a little bit more flexible in a way that it's it makes perfect sense. And in some deliverables they maybe don't even exist, so to say, but rather that it's justified why they don't exist. That's the progress is being done in this area, so it's normal that this one hasn't been made progress. So we look at the whole.
Yeah, thanks. I wanted to follow up because this in your presentation we had a lot of boxes to tick and a lot of deliverables that have been potentially to be submitted. So a beneficiary could rather see it as a menu and an offer, and you don't have to fulfill all of them, but you have to at least justify when you did not choose this one and prefer to work and progress on something else. Is that right from my understanding?
You would not believe the amount of discussions that we had to decide on the proper analogy. I think the menu is a good direction, but maybe it's not the perfect. So I don't know which one is the perfect. Like maybe one way to see it is that the deliverables are the ways, let's say the channels or the containers through which to demonstrate the progress. So it's not so yes, you can choose through which one you show the progress, but it's like, okay, what will you put in each of them in the plate of options to show progress, let's say, and then we look at the whole, so to say.
Thanks, Jen.
Yeah, just a question following up this topic, because you're mentioning about the finance, how it comes, and then what is expected from the applicants and the candidates. But you're also offering support, right, for them to reach and send the deliverable. So it might be good just to highlight briefly again the support that you're gonna offer to help them, to reach this type of requirements that you have.
Yeah, from our side, they have access. They have access to the toolbox, and we are there, or at least the help desk of the toolbox is there to help them in doing the technical assessments. At the same time, there will be webinars. So there is exchange between regions, how the different regions take the steps in the process. But there's also a webinar providing guidance on the steps of the climate risk assessment. And of course, there is room for questions. But again, there is support, but we won't be doing the climate risk assessments for a region.
I have the feeling you have the support from CLIMAAX that you have it much better explained than I'm able to at this point from our side. But essentially, it's a mix of, it will be a mix of, let's say, the webinars, the training sessions, okay, this is the methodology, the introduction to the content, the introduction to the tools that we put at the disposal, which follows your, I guess, your logic in the sense of we put it at the disposal, then it's up to you to essentially uptake it. So we have that. We will have limited, but we will have the opportunity to work directly with some regions. That's something that we do. That's going to be specifically on some components. We still have to sort out exactly how that is going to work, but again, that's going to be very limited. We're going to use it more as an example that can help the others, but of course it will help the ones that we support. So we have that. So again, we have the webinars, which is input, and we have the direct support, the limited direct support, and then we have the, let's say, the knowledge co-creation part. So that's essentially, that's going to be several things. So from one side, it's going to be extracting, working with certain region, being like, okay, this sounds like you've been doing interesting work in here. So let's try and see if we get some, if we understand what methodology you've been using that maybe is useful for the others, and then we repackage it in a way that's supposed to be useful. But also, we're going to be incentivizing, facilitating, and so on, different ways of peer learning, essentially. So from a mentorship program to the innovation practice groups, which are essentially, if you're familiar with communities of practice approaches and so on. So we're going to be doing a few of these, but as they are so, it's an emerging kind of a needs-based emerging approach, so it's hard to say exactly how it's going to operate. But yeah, so those are the different ways.
Thanks. And just another question: is it something on the when you apply that you should choose if you would like to be part of the co-creation part as well, or the level of involvement? Do you somehow choose it or not? Is it something to be decided on each applicant?
So that's a very interesting question from a selection point of view. We have opted for not making it part of the selection, so as to not influence, so that it's not a selection criteria, so to say. I mean, we are very interested in the knowledge sharing bit, but it's not necessarily what you will do with us, but rather what you want to do in general regarding knowledge sharing. So the short answer is no. It's not really answer. It's something that we'll work on it.
There we go from my side, Matthias. You can go ahead.
Okay. I do have a last opportunity for the participants and the audience to ask some questions while I'm stating one of my last questions in this roundtable. You're now in the situation where you have to come up and tell me what would your ideal candidate or applicant look like. So if you could choose and describe who would be the perfect fit to apply for your funding opportunity, how would you do it, and how would this candidate look like in the end? Just to get an understanding of how close the audience is to your description of an ideal candidate. So, Ricardo, do you want to go first?
Maybe that helps you, Frederiek. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Let's see. What does my perfect candidate look like? I think it's a region. So yeah, be aware. I can say my perfect candidate, but it is not at all saying that others do not qualify. But I would say it must be a region that's vulnerable to at least one hazard, and having multiple hazards, it makes it challenging and thus interesting. So say heat waves in combination with wildfires, but maybe wildfires that in the winter lead to floods on the same grounds. So the diversity that is in hazards is really interesting. And yeah, of course, the ideal candidate has some technical skills itself or some experience in climate risk assessment. And if that candidate cannot show that it has it or doesn't have it, it brings on board a good technical service to help him out. Yeah.
Thank you. That's a very good explanation.
Absolutely. So with the same disclaimer nothing I say here implies anything about disqualifying anything else. I will also say that that in our call document we have I believe it's a full page of what we describe as our perfect candidate. So there's a lot there. My attempt at a summary right now is essentially a region. Again, we're quite neutral if it's a municipality, a region, or somewhere in between, but rather, let's say a region that is very aware of the needs for adaptation. Maybe not fully, technically, completely, wholly understood, but from but quite present that this is a priority. This is something that needs to be solved next for next year, for the next 10 years, for the next 50, for the next 100 years. That the urgency and the awareness of the problem is there, and probably that there is a little bit of frustration of, we want to take this seriously, we want to take this with a long term, we want to see how this we want to see how the pieces get together, but we're lacking the resources to do this work seriously enough in a way that would be satisfying. So it's, maybe I can take this emotional approach, this a frustration with having to deal with adaptation incrementally when there is a wish and a commitment to do it transformationally. Even sounds a little bit poetic, maybe.
Thank you for your replies. Very helpful. Very interesting. I think I would close this roundtable and pass on to Chen for wrap up.
Okay, thank you. Well, first of all, I really want to thank you, Frederiek and Ricardo, for this very informative and good presentations. I hope it's much more clear now to everyone here. And also I would like to thank the participants for the questions, because, that's how we make a valuable discussion, and that was really good. So I would just like to wrap up with a few points. These are kind of superficial, but just to summarize a bit what we have discussed here. So if I understand correctly, the focus, for instance, for CLIMAAX is more focused on implementing the multi-risk climate assessment, while the pathways to resilience focus on the adaptation planning phase. And there are a few steps in that. Regarding finance, CLIMAAX is offering up to 300,000 euros is the maximum. In Pathways to Resilience, 210,000 euros. It's not needed co-funded in both projects. And you should check the payment schedules and conditions on the website and the requirements. The call, so CLIMAAX, you're going to have the first call. You can apply by the 3rd of March, correct?
Yeah, the 8th of March.
8th of March, good. And for the Pathways to Resilience, you can apply by the 22nd of February, correct? But there are other calls coming. One more for CLIMAAX and 2 more for Pathways to Resilience.
One more for us, but it's also in June, but 1 year later than CLIMAAX, so 2025.
Okay, good. So you should check the websites of course, also to check the deadlines. And the applicants, so CLIMAAX is going to support 60 regions and communities from the member states in these 2 calls, so more or less 20 to 30 in each. And Pathways to Resilience is going to support 40 regions in the biogeographical region. So you should have a look at that. Unfortunately, UK is not included in both, but there are also no prerequisites for applying for the calls. So this is kind of summing up. Matthias, would you like to add something here?
Yeah, no, very good summary. I just wanted to thank also all the speakers again, and I really appreciate it that we have this format here and be able to have you both and both funding opportunities at the same event. So it's really easy, and I hope that the audience appreciated that we can provide this guidance and help to distinguish between what is in both of the different calls available and which one is the one I I'm rather interested at the moment, maybe not in the long perspective, but right now I want to focus on what, if I have to choose between one of them, that should be much easier now, I hope. So thank you for your time. I would like to come back to our initial introduction. We will have a feedback survey available and to gather your feedback on this session, and also to, you should have the link now, to help us to get more information on the future, on the second cycle of our open training sessions, so that we can ensure that the content will be of relevance for you. So you can join it on Slido, either scan the QR code or go to slido.com and type in the number. It should not take long, so it should be a quick survey to you all. Jen, you can go ahead as we see the first results coming in.
I can also answer the evaluation survey, but I think that's cheating in the game now. Everyone answer and then.
So otherwise, I wanted to thank you all again, also from my side, to the speakers, to the audience. It was very interesting for me to have you all here and to see your questions and to reflect on them. And thanks for joining in today, and see you in one of our next Resilience sessions or other sessions, or even in person in one of the next upcoming events on adaptation.
Yes, thank you. Thank you all for participating. And keep following the social media for Resilience, because we're going to share the recording of this webinar. And also the presentations, Ricardo and Frederiek, if possible.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you all. Thank you for answering as well, and have a good day, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Of course, we're going to continue here a bit just for the answers, but maybe we can stop right